Welcome to PickleJarTodo Presents Side Project Spotlight, episode 40. This is a developer's journey into making cool stuff. I'm Kotaro.
I'm Steve.
And I'm Aaron.
And we are Philly Cocoa, a Philadelphia-based Cocoa Heads community focused on Apple development. That primarily, but not exclusively, means iOS, Mac, tvOS, and watchOS development. Philly Cocoa's true desire is to take you higher on your own developer journey. Whew.
Indeed.
I think we should come up with a way to make one of these AI models basically do this intro and insert. What, Aaron, you were about
I
to
don't
say
think
something?
that would be that hard.
No, you could do that.
I don't think it'd be that hard at all.
So I speaking of AI stuff, I was actually using AI yesterday. I was using Bing to help me to write some stuff for someone. I got asked basically to write some stuff for someone's website, and I took what this person already had, and I basically asked Bing. I was like, go to this website and and look on the web and summarize this and give me something to start with. And I did several rounds of this, and then I started editing it myself and rewriting it and basically long and short of it is these tools are useful, but you very, very quickly run into this is not very good when you actually read it. It superficially is pretty decent writing, and then you're like, no, actually it's not. And but what's really useful is that it a summarization of what's out there. So instead of reading through a page of stuff and then you having to take your own notes down about it, in this case it makes sense to have the computer summarize it. Of course, I said, look, you're going to have to fact check this for me because I didn't actually
maybe you should ask ChatGPT to fact check it for you.
No, I asked the person. I said I said that you're going to have to fact check this.
That would be so hilarious.
But then I rewrote it a few times. So I've done 3 drafts, and I would say the majority of it is me because I rewrote a lot of it, but there's still the factoids that are in there, were from the output from the GPT, and then I just but it's pretty useful in that respect. It's okay, I want to summarize stuff. I want you to search the web, especially Bing, because right now Bing's the one that can go do the web search.
I mean, now you think about it. I mean, I know that there's this concept about agents or something of that nature.
Oh yeah, using auto GPT.
To help sort of almost like a handoff to the other, or it's almost like microservices within each other, right? To have conversations and work with each other to just do a bigger, larger project.
It's like they realize that GPT 4 and 3 and everything is just a language text generator and not actually something that does anything useful other than generate text.
Exactly. Although the way that you go about making one of these LLMs use tools is kind of interesting. You basically have to train it to be able to insert the call out to the tools when it encounters things. It's kind of neat. Right. And the tool using stuff, which I think I count Bing as one of those. Again, the earliest example here of GPT-4 that we can all access that does this. It makes it more useful. For sure, but you're right, Aaron. It's a chatbot. It's a text generator, and so it's really good at giving it a chunk of text, and then it summarizes it or rewrites it. I asked it to rewrite things several times, and it just keeps taking in the entire context of the conversation, so it can keep doing it. And I tried different prompting, as I like to call on the internet, prompting, in order to set it up. And I said, you are like a bot, you are like a writer, a professional writer in this respect, blah blah blah. And I tried to give it some context, see if that would help. In my case, I don't know if it really helped anything, but as we know from our off podcast talk with today's not a sponsor segment from the Philly Cocoa meeting. Proompt engineering is important when using these things.
Yes.
So now everybody's saying that you can't not say prompt once you've seen it.
And of course, when we said we had a very tight schedule today, we immediately go off the rails.
Yeah.
Off topic. So
we'll move on.
Let's start with our updates on our current project that we're working on, current side project that we've been working on for practically about a year. At this point, almost a year, because I think we started in June, officially, right?
Yeah, we're just trying to give people an example of what not to do. Yeah, it's a public service.
It's public service. So this app, ironically, is called PickleJar. It's a codename PickleJar for now.
I don't remember what it is. I saw some app that like literally was the pickle jar metaphor. Like it was like the icon. I think it was. It was like a jar of rocks kind of metaphor. I was like, that's the pickle jar thing. It's really funny.
Ironically enough, getting back to our off-topic topic was like that the icon that I made almost looked like it could have been done through Stable Diffusion.
Oh, we should totally do that for an icon just to give it a shot. But yeah, it could have been or an early version of Midjourney, five versions ago.
Yeah, it's like amateur hour here. But anyway, so this app is basically started out as a habit forming app for the Mac, and all the platforms really, but we've now isolated it down to just iPhone, maybe iPad if we have the time.
Yeah, and I gotta say the remnants in the code base of that with the if defs everywhere is really annoying. Like if you're gonna do a Mac app and you need to do if defs around certain things, we gotta see if we can extract that into a method or something. Like gotta hide it from the main layout because it actually makes it really hard to modify. I was working on it like last night, and it slows you down when you're trying to figure out what you can change without breaking stuff, and you have these like if defs everywhere. It kind of makes it annoying. But
I do find myself as a developer trying to build trying to follow more modern methods. Where it's ideal to like move a lot of the core logic into a package or into its own set of packages.
Yes, we should do that. We should do packages. I started doing that with some other work, and it's pretty cool. It's not as much busy work as you think it would be to set it up.
No,
I think the main thing I've been doing is you really got to break things down to very small views. Like you smaller than you might think. Because the moment you start having logic, more than maybe like one if statement or something in there, but the moment you start having any logic in your view, you quickly get into a real mess. Like SwiftUI does not like logic in the view. The most you would ever want to do is something like if you have no data or something, you want to show an empty view, but then the view should be rendered from a function or another view somewhere. You should be bringing it in. You should not be like writing it all in one spot, I think. So I've been breaking stuff down as I go into these small little chunks.
I mean, even I like, for the sake of expedience, I tend to put a lot of functions, like private functions, into my view, and that's to me, I'm like, that's a bad smell, and I need to put that out, like take that out and put it in its own helper method or its own class or something that's a little more like something that doesn't necessarily relate to the view itself.
Yeah, although I do that at the beginning, it's perfectly fine in SwiftUI. Just put everything in one file, and then I always when I do put functions in there, and sometimes it's just I'll keep them in there. When I do functions, I always put them in an extension of the view so they don't pollute the rest of the namespace. Yeah, right. Yeah. So that's like a little technique. That way, you also don't have to worry about naming things the same.
I almost treat that almost like this my own personal to do. Like I'll do the same thing as you in that sense of like I'll put in an extension because I know that's a smell, right? I know like I want to do that. I want to move that out eventually. Yeah, it makes it easy. You want to know something really bad smell? I at work, on Friday I was working on stuff and I was like, at the end of the day, it was all this stuff that's still sort of broken, and I just wrote my bug list to fix and feature list as to do comments at the top of the file. And there's like and I even checked it in and I was something like lazy devs, issue list or something as one of the things in the, because this is on a feature branch. So I'm just going to squash the commit later. But I just did it. I was like, I don't feel like making like Jira tickets or something for this, so I'm just going to type them at the top. You don't want to put that in a Jira ticket? No, I just wanted to. I just checked it. That's really funny. I did it on purpose, but I'm the only one using the code base, so it really doesn't matter. But you know what? I just put a bunch of to dos in. I was like, whatever. Yeah, get to it. I mean, the funny part is like, I don't know what it is about company culture or whatever you want to call it, but when they talk a lot about technical debt, they don't talk about a lot of the investment of like cleaning that up, right? They just like, okay, you know what? This month, it's just about like they almost treat it as like, okay, it's like I have to clean the room, right? Not. I'm not even talking about the developers. Developers are more than willing to do it, I'm sure, but it's like it is much more like, okay, we have these deadlines, we have these things that have business value, quote unquote. Like, can you do that later, aka your own time?
Well, in this case, I'm building a new screen. It's SwiftUI, integrating it into the old app, and the screen just has a few things that don't quite work right. There's a weird layout problem I'm having with like a label for some reason, and there's like a crasher which is related to like nil stuff coming in, because it's like basically data coming in on Objective C side, and then I have to translate it into Swift stuff, and then I have to instructs, and then I have to display it and do different things. So it's all new code pretty much, and I just as I've been testing, it's like 90% done. And there was just there's a few bugs, and there's like a couple of features I need to get. Like I need to get it to open the maps, Apple Maps, when you tap something, and then there's some bugs. And so I was like, you know what, I could make a ticket somewhere for this, but it's like 4:30, so I'm just gonna whatever. I'm just on a Friday. I'm just gonna put them on the top to do and check it in, whatever. Gotcha. Because I know I'm gonna go back to that on Monday. I'm gonna go back to that one file. I guess anyway.
So you put it in the code, or I
put it in the code. Yeah, okay. I put it at the top as comments, to do comments, and at the top of the file that I was looking at.
Right. Oh, I keep forgetting. Like, you're not using GitHub issue, where I'll tend to put that in the GitHub issue.
No, I originally thought I'll do it in my GitHub. I mean, Git. I don't have GitHub. I have GitLab. Mm-hmm. I was going to put it in that, except I didn't actually have an issue for this. Apparently, I went to look. I was like, oh wait, I don't actually have an issue, and then I have to like. And so I was like, screw it. Yeah. I'm not saying it's a good thing to do. I'm saying it was just I thought it was funny. I amused myself when I did it.
As long as you don't push to production on a Friday. That's
no. I mean, no. And it's all going to be deleted in the next check-in anyway, which is just funny. I amused myself with my intentionally poor commenting habit.
As it's probably well known within our regular people who listen to this podcast, where our progress is very slow.
Yeah. Okay. So let's to wrap up the progress update. You guys didn't do anything because of tax season primarily. Because yes. I'm the one.
Well, at least that's my excuse.
Well, I had an accountant, so my taxes were done like a few weeks ago. So I didn't have it. So
smart man.
So I was working on using that new grid container view from it's iOS 16. Mm-hmm. Which is kind of interesting because I'm building the like a grid layout of. So I went in there. I thought I had to do more than this. I went in there, and Kotaro, you already fixed some of the sprint stuff we had talked about previously. Like you already made functions in there to get sprints that are bounded by dates and stuff that we had talked about before. So that was pretty interesting. It looks like it's already in there. I thought I was gonna have to write those functions. I'm like, no, it's already there. So then I was like, okay, I'm gonna make the. I love how Kotaro, you're like, I did that. I was like, I think that was you. I was like, it looks like you're checking.
I was thinking, like, yeah, I think I did something like that. I don't know if I did it that good.
And then I had to merge the master branch or the back into my feature branch, and then fix a conflict, which also led me. And these are all tangents here, but they're kind of useful. I had to fix a merge conflict, and merge conflicts. I always get confused on merge conflicts about like what, depending on like the UI that I'm looking at. And so I downloaded Kaleidoscope again. I haven't bought it, but it's $100, and I was like, that seems really expensive. But then I started using it. I was like, that's not really that expensive compared to every other option. I was like, I had the first thing that Git tried to use was like, I didn't even know I had this, some like Vim diff tool or something. It was like this Vim based tool. I was like, I can't even understand what I'm looking at. It's in a terminal window with like colored ASCII text, I'm like, or UTF-8, I guess, technically. But you know what I mean? It was like, that's terrible. I'm not going to use that. I was like, it was so weird. I had to exit out of Vim like 4 times, like quit, like Q exclamation point, like 4 times to get to leave. Anyway, so that was one. And then I was like, I'm not using the file diff tool, whatever, for that comes with Xcode. That's just a monstrosity. It's awful. And then, it works. It's just ugly. And so I was like, I'll try Kaleidoscope. And you know what? It works. It's nice. And then once I figured out what button to press to merge things, and it worked, and I was able to do it. Because what was weird is I don't even know why it felt that there was a conflict, because I was like just take Culturo's edits. It was weird. There was nothing really conflicting. It was just added stuff, but whatever. Kit thought that was a conflict. So,
I guess there's like blank spaces and
it was like there was like spaces, and then it was like this stuff that it's not really a conflict. It's just got changed. I didn't. So anyway, so it didn't really require me to do anything except hit a button that says just take everything from your branch. So I did that, and then I worked on the grid, and grid is kind of cool. Now they had like lazy H grid, right? Like lazy V grid or something from before. This is grid where you can explicitly lay it out. And I think it renders everything up front, so it may or may not be a good idea to do that. But, give it a shot. You could do... What's nice about it, it's very simple. So you create a grid, you say grid, and then you create your rows. And in each row, the items you put in the row get laid out like left to right. And the views. And so you can use like a view builder to build your content in your row or whatever. So what I was doing is... trying to figure out like how many of these squares do I need to represent a month of logs for something, and then I was using your what is it called, log checkbox, which is the view that tells you what state your log entry was in, whether you made a log entry or you didn't and you made a log entry. Like it's like it tracks whether you did the task that you said you were going to do or not, and if you didn't do it, we actually distinguish between just not doing anything that day and actually not doing something for a reason. So, so I was doing that. So I got it to lay out stuff. It's just not 100% working yet, so I didn't check it in. So we'll see. I gotta figure out the logic a little bit, make sure, and then use real data and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. I didn't do it last time I was on that screen because I thought it was going to be a lot harder to get the grid stuff laid out. I was like, no, but it's like all built in now. It's in SwiftUI. It's very nice. So that's the most of it. It was merging issues and then doing this grid stuff, which I'm going to finish up soon and get that working. And then that'll mean we'll have and Aaron had already gone in there and fixed, I think it was you, Aaron, that fixed the issue that I had left undone originally, which was linking, choosing a goal and then changing which logs were displayed. I think you did that.
I don't know. Probably not, since I haven't done it.
Well, it's Culturo then, because I didn't do it. I didn't do blame to find out, or whatever they renamed that thing.
Oh, what did we rename it?
No, I mean the command blame, git blame. Is that still a thing in Git?
Yes, I think it's still a thing. But.
So I didn't, or there's another alias for when it's not blameworthy, when it's praiseworthy. What is? It's someone else besides me. So I thought I didn't check, but it was one of you guys that had done this.
I guess it was me, but
maybe it was you, because it was just I thought I had to do that too. So basically, I went in and 2/3 of the things I thought I had to do last night were already done, which was nice.
I think I do recall trying to figure out, like, because the thing about the card system in general and the card view has to deal with a lot of the like what should show up at what given time. I vaguely remember that, and then I had to figure out, like, how do I bring back a list of logs or bring back a list of things based on references. So that's the extent of what I remember. But
but it worked out, and it uses some core data queries, and it's not bad. There's a lot of, like, speaking of technical debt earlier, there's a lot of like technical debt in this app already, like from changes in our choices that make things a little bit confusing, and I'm trying to delete things as I go.
Yep.
Because there's like extraneous files and you're like, and not consistent naming. So I'm trying to fix stuff as I go and just do that.
I think I've renamed stuff like several times.
Yeah, I'm gonna rename things again. Naming's hard, but there's like there's a lot of, here's a problem. There's a lot of incomplete screens, like things that you think they'll work and then they don't, and you look at the code and you're like, oh well, that's why it's not even wired up at all. So I think we have to make sure that we're not doing that. Like, if you work on one thing at a time and try to get it into some kind of usable state, and then move on to the next thing, because there's too many screens that are just like they look like surface level, like they'll work, and then you try to use it in or like components and they just don't work. And you're like, why doesn't this work? Because it doesn't have any data. It's like, why doesn't it have data? Because we changed how we were using core data since we wrote this or something. Stuff like that. But it's okay. It's what happened. It's funny how something that has that we're so slow at making has somehow created technical debt. Like somehow we did that. We haven't even released it. Like we're savants at technical debt.
Oh my goodness. I mean, it's hard because like a lot of times it's kind of a product of like a lot of us picking it up after like not touching it for a while and then trying to reconstruct what was there, not really remembering a lot of the stuff, and it's like, oh wait, I need this or this and that. Like these conversations are like happening in our Slack group or on off camera conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to put notes in the issues when I'm working on something, but a lot of the stuff conversations happen outside.
Yeah, I mean, these are all good lessons in that sense of like, oh, like one of the other things that I realized for myself at least was not really having a clear understanding of like how I would want the logging system to work in that sense, and maybe that's a longer conversation. But like when we create a car or goal, for example, like what should be there as a default? How do we define like the way the logs work? Based on the like, because I think goals and logs are kind of like this weird, like have a weird relationship that when it comes to the time and the dates.
I guess because you have logs have a creation date.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's like basically it.
Yeah,
like so and goals have sprints and sprints have time boxes.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're displaying logs, you have to basically query for everything. They're always related to a goal. They're never related to more than one goal.
Yeah.
And so you just get everything for the particular goal you're looking at, and then you want to, just depending on how you display them. You display them as a list. That's one thing. If you want to display them as a calendar, then you have to figure out what the months are, and that's where I'm working on the algorithm, because I'm like, where do I want to get that data from? Do I want to go through the logs and extract it that way? Do I want to look at the goal or see if there's a sprint? And then you could not have a sprint. I don't think we decided whether you could not have a sprint or not. But if you didn't have a sprint, that would be one thing. We might just, depending on if it's too hard, I'll just be like, you just have to have a sprint. Everything's done.
And that could be like an everyday thing, right? But the thing is, like on that level, we'd have to just say, you know what, you have a sprint that's defaultly there.
Yeah,
and it's like every day.
Yeah. See, if you look at other apps that do this, you start kind of intuiting their data models, because they start having the same problems where they have to like, okay, now I have to say this thing happens every day or on this schedule. And then you're basically talking about how do you do repeating tasks in a to-do app or on a calendar. It's like that kind of problem.
Right,
and so, it is what it is.
Sure.
It's surprisingly more, not hard, but it's surprisingly more like sharp edge cases than you might think, because you're kind of delving into a little bit of what a calendar does in that respect. Anytime you have to deal with dates, everything gets a little bit harder than you would expect. Everything's just a little harder. Luckily, though, I got to say Swift and Apple in general have really good date libraries. They may be a little verbose, but kind of maybe out of necessity. But if you take them and you wrap them up into useful function calls for your app, then you can deal with that. Like in Objective-C world years ago, I made this entire like API service just to quickly generate not even just formats of dates, but do like basic date stuff, comparisons and things. So if you do that, you can take the somewhat verbose API calls that I've in there and make it really easy to use.
I think it's funny because like when I work with the more modern APIs, they're a lot more flexible than what you can do, but it's always hard to remember how to use them.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So that's why it's better to like you just write your own wrapper around this stuff.
Sure.
So that's where we're at right now. So there's going to be more progress next time, because this last week we had tax season, and I had like a lot of unexpected stuff happening the last couple weeks. And usually, and I've said this before, usually I can only do 1 week at a time anyway, because I have to edit the podcast and another podcast, and so that takes some time, and so. So moving on from that, though, I think we should go to before we get to the main topic, which is, do we even say what the main topic was? I don't think we did. I think we leave a surprise.
This will lead into it.
Well, this will lead into the main topic. Our not a sponsor this week is getclipdish.com, or the Clipdish app.
Yes, the Clipdish app from one of our one of Philly Coco's members, Matt Smullinger. Is it Smullinger or Smullinger? Sorry. Like
I don't know, but that's
anyway,
awesome. So
what does ClipDish do exactly?
So what does ClipDish not do? No, it's
oh, no.
No, it's a
We're already off to a great start.
Yeah, no. ClipDish is I guess it started its life as a recipe clipping app.
Mm-hmm.
So it has an extension, or you can use a Discover tab in the app itself to find recipes. So if you find a recipe on the internet, in your browser, you can use the extension, or you find a recipe in their Discover tab, you can tap it and it opens up a web page. In both cases, you start with the web page of a recipe you like on some cooking site, and then you clip it. And what it does, it does some magic on the server. Mm-hmm. and actually extracts just the stuff you need to know about the recipe. The actual ingredients and the instructions and I guess an image, and it gives you this nice readable format, saves it to your library, and now you can easily refer to it when you're making your dishes. And you think that, oh, that doesn't sound like very much. That is a lot. Have you been to an average cooking site? I mean, they're just awful. They're strewn with ads and like extraneous text, and you try to figure out like what's the next thing I need to do in the ingredient list, and you screw it up. You put too much cocoa powder in or whatever you're doing, and then you ruin the dish. So this makes it this helpful. It's helpful for the cooking impaired like myself.
Yes. And according to its website, you can save any recipes. Now, granted, this is a subscription-based model, so they give you, I think it was like up to 5 recipes.
Yeah, I mean, I saved a few on the free plan so far, and yeah.
And basically, you can also build your own grocery list, and you can.
Yes.
They provide a variety of different ways to discover new recipes. So they actually have a discovery page where it provides you with some preset list of
and you can
recipes.
Search it.
Yeah, you can search it.
And also it has this new AI assistant Ask Chef tab now. You can try it for free in the app at the moment. And it uses the magic of GPT to actually have a little conversation with you about your cooking. So you can ask it like what to make for breakfast or something, and it can give you suggestions. And it's just a simplified GPT chat interface, but focused on recipes and cooking and stuff. We got a glimpse behind the curtain during a Philly Cook event. I'm not going to tell you anything about it it was
secret sauce.
The secret sauce. It's impressive the work that they're doing. Okay, yes. They understand, the ClipDish. They understand exactly what they're doing, and they have big plans for this feature. And I hope it works out because it's very cool.
That's right. So
and you can play with the early version right now for free. So
yes,
that's a great reason to download ClipDish.
There's no reason not to try it.
Yeah, exactly. Because seriously, there's how many of these AI things are free to try right now without even like setting up an account or anything. Mm-hmm. This is of course a focused one, but I mean, if you've never used one of these things too, this is a great way. Just download it and just start talking to the AI overlord. Your chef overlord.
Still working on the copy on the branding of that. Right, Chefy.
They are, yeah. I think it's called the app I was looking at was called like Ask Chef, I think, at the moment. But cool. Yeah, they're not calling them. We said they should call them Clippy, but it was like, oh no, we can't do that. Can't call them Clippy because that's
the Microsoft lawyers would just like break down the walls and just like, oh no.
Somewhere right now, there's a Microsoft lawyer who felt a tingle.
Yeah, I feel a disturbance in the force.
Yeah, but Get ClipDish is that's the getclipdish.com, right?
Yep,
it's a great app. You should download it. Remember, this is our not a sponsor segment, which means we are not actually sponsored. We just really like the app, and we're trying to put a spotlight on, especially Philly Coca developers who are making cool stuff that we like, and so because this is Side Project Spotlight, and it also leads into our main topic today because Get ClipDish is an indie app company, and we thought today our main topic would be going indie, because I don't think we've actually talked about that formally on the podcast, and I'm sure that this will not be a complete discussion, especially because of time. But we thought this might be fun because especially around this time, people start thinking about it again. WWDC is coming up, and And you're like it's getting warm, and you're like, do I really want to go and work every day at the regular 9 to 5 job? Or
I mean, it's one of those things where it's certainly with considering with all the mass layoffs, and you have a lot of people who have a lot of time on their hands with, particularly if they're iOS or developer skill sets, is like would this be the time to take that chance, and where are the opportunities and that kind of stuff. I mean, just for context in terms of like iOS community, certainly when the iOS SDK or iPhone SDK first came out, people were chomping at the bits at that point. And there's just like, you just had all sorts of apps or app ideas. And I think during the early days when people would come to Philly Cocoa meetups, it would be a lot of people that have like a very indie spirited kind of mentality. It was a lot of people just want to start their own business. Some people did actually. Curtis from Slopes comes to mind.
Yes. Take a shot, everybody. You've mentioned Slopes.
Right. Joe Chaplinsky with his Fin app and his caffeine? What's that caffeine app that he did?
Oh crap! Now I'm forgetting. I am using Fin right now, though. We still use Fin if you're listening.
Yes,
Joe.
Shout out to you, Joe. And there were plenty of others that I'm blanking at the moment, but I think that's sort of the interesting model back then, was to sort of like work at your day job for as much as you can, or do consulting for as much as you can, until like your app would make enough money somehow to like even like eventually like one would supplement the other for a period of time. And so you would do some consulting work, and then in your spare time you'd work on your own app, and then somewhere along the line you would figure out a way to like it would make enough money so that you could sustain yourself and every update or whatever.
You would start as like a side project.
Yeah.
So one thing to get straight is none of us currently are indie per se. We all have 9 to 5 jobs, but Coltro, you were until recently a consultant, and you made some products to different levels of success.
Very small success.
Well, pizza money success, which is
pizza
still
money
pretty.
success.
Well, I mean, look, considering how expensive pizza is nowadays and how much I love pizza, if I had pizza level success, that would be great for me. So, you're the most firsthand experience of recently with this stuff. So, but you're right. And early on, there's like the two routes, I feel like, in going indie that we always have talked about, and they kind of blur together too. It doesn't have to be one or the other. But there's the product route, and then there's the consulting route, and then there's like the blend. And I think what you're talking about is kind of the blend, or you're talking about kind of going to you're kind of the soft launch into a product when you're starting with like a side project. So, like, you got to think about what your situation is and what does it mean to you to go indie, right? Because we had this discussion for the podcast started. Does that mean you have a successful side project that brings in some revenue for you, or does it mean you can quit your job? And I think most people, though, they probably think in their head, I can quit my job. And so I think we should focus on that avenue, because there's a lot of stuff involved in quitting your job that you may not have realized. And so I think that would be really interesting for people who have never done that or considered it.
Get used to eating ramen again.
No,
not the good kind.
But like I think one thing that I wish a lot of places would go into when they talk about going indie or whatever. I remember when I was first looking at this stuff years ago. What are the logistics of it? What does it mean if let's say I have an app. Say I made an app that on the new headset that's coming out in WWDC or whatever, right? And it's really successful, and I'm making in revenue, and I think, okay, I'm making enough money that I might actually want to consider quitting my job. What do I actually need to consider to do that? Because you've done this before, Coltro. So what do I need to consider?
Well, first of all, if you did it on your individual account, you already have issues. Just because it's an individual account and like you're not a company yet.
So you need to create a company.
Well, you don't need to. I mean, you could still use your individual account, especially if you're like indie as in like a solo developer, right? There's a solopreneur versus like a team of 3 or something like that, right?
Right. However, for tax reasons, you should
probably transfer that into a company account.
It makes it easier to do deductions, basically.
Yes. Just that and separation. Yeah, separation.
Yeah.
Of personal versus
exactly
company assets. Right?
Exactly.
if
So
somebody-
yeah, so you could start out as a solopreneur. You could start out just on your name. However, I mean, but you're limited in things you can do on your App Store account too. Not super limited if you're just by yourself,
Right.
but if you want to bring in other people,
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's just worth setting it up. It's if especially if you start making money. And then your app though. See, here's the problem: if you start out your app and it's successful and it's under your name, changing it to go under an LLC is not impossible, or even maybe as difficult as it used to be. You can transfer it, but that's a new account, so then it ends up in the App Store differently. It may be pretty transparent to users, but there are some edge cases where it's not, depending on what you used to build the app in the back end.
Sure.
Now, it is true though that there's less of those problems there used to be. It used to be the fact if you use like anything in iCloud, essentially, like if you did it, there were so many. Like a few years ago, there were so many like pitfalls. But anyway, I think you should probably once you start making money, create an LLC.
So what does that mean when you create an LLC? So you should probably just get an accountant to do all that for you because you have to.
I didn't. Don't make my mistake. I did it myself, which is not hard, except that the state software was so bad that it mangled my paperwork, and then I had to like send in another one, and then the IRS website like gave me I don't have the PDF from them because it didn't print right, and I was like, I have the number, but not. It's like just have someone else do it.
The state and now recently the city has been moving into a new system, and the new system is horrible. Because you can't get in basically, so it's just like the amount of paperwork or the amount of.
Are you talking about for the taxes?
Yeah, for the taxes,
Luckily,
for PA, it's just like a brutal hot mess. So
so good. So that's one thing to be prepared for: the brutal hot mess of this crap, which is probably why people.
And so it's just better to get like if you're gonna especially to get started, I would just recommend and like get a proper accountant, and then
get an accountant.
And one that's within your state, because they understand all the state. They have all the hookups. They have all the contacts. They can clean up a lot of your mess.
Yeah.
Like one thing that I messed up on was my PA state thing, and was constantly getting dinged until I finally just bit the bullet and just like, here, an accountant fix for $400 some fix my problem.
What you mean you were filing wrong or something?
Of how much that accountant costs, because that's a good indicator of whether you're making enough money. It's like, well, is it enough to justify that cost of that accountant to set up the LLC?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, setting up an LLC is like you could do that through. There's like a Stripe thing you can do it, but that sets up in Delaware. But there's like you could do it. The paperwork for setting up an LLC in Pennsylvania anyway is pretty easy. Okay. By the way, we're not giving you any kind of actual financial advice or anything or business advice, but this is just from our experience and for your entertainment. So disclaimer done. But but in PA, it's when I did it, it's like easier now than when I did it. There's actually not a lot involved. You can totally do it yourself, but it's just easier if you go through a service, or if you have an accountant can do it, or a lawyer can do it. And then like I had a lawyer do it for one company I'm involved with, or we had a lawyer do it, and that was fine. Yeah, and it was easy.
They're not. I mean, sometimes depending on which ones you pick, I mean, they could be, they could range in terms of quality. In my case, I had a lot of mangled stuff that needed a lot of different types of paperwork that had to get fixed. But again, it's a write-off in that sense. So the other thing you want to do is like create all your bank accounts and your credit cards under that company once you get that set up. So you find one that has a reasonable, like, you can find a variety of ones with like decent services. Just make sure you find one that you can locally go to.
So I have two business bank accounts now. It's maybe it's a stretch to call them a business because they don't make any money, but I have the one that's at with one partner, right? And that one I don't like that because we don't make enough revenue for it to be worthwhile. They do a fee and stuff. But the other one I've had forever is with my local credit union, and that works. So when you're super small, it probably doesn't matter which one you go to. But as you said, as long as you're comfortable with them, and for me at first it was easy to use the credit union when I started because that credit union was the one I was already using for myself, so that made it easier. But yeah, pick a bank. Just make sure you have a separate bank account, like wherever you put it, and then you probably will benefit from using some software to help do your track your ledger. Like I use Zero for some companies, which XERO, which is pretty good, and of course QuickBooks exists, and there's other options. But you can use a spreadsheet, But you got to track this stuff somehow, and your accountant will be happy if you can give a P&L or something at the end of the year, and it just and everything's all sorted in different categories appropriately. So that's the thing. Talk to your accountant about how to set that up. Like maybe your accountant has a preference.
So then the other interesting thing is like, obviously you want to make sure that you have. I guess for at least for me, it was like understanding where your budget was and like how much you could spend and like what was your runway in terms of like what's the threshold before you was like, all right, maybe I need to like get a full-time job. And I think there's concerns around that, right? Yeah, so like if you already have a job and maybe you're like doing this as a side hustle, then that's great.
That's me. That's like me. That's what So that means the advantage of that is, of course, as long as you have that full-time job, you don't really have to worry about money or the business being like really working, And the downside is it's just kind of a constant drain, and it does tend to make you lazy because you don't have that fire necessarily to keep you going because you don't need this to work to make a living. Like there's a big difference between Chris and I have like one side business that it's had very little revenue. It's never really made a profit so far the last couple of years. But her main business that she does, which I'm not involved with, is how she makes a living. So her efforts are like order of magnitude more involved in that one versus the other one, which is understandable. Sure. Because one makes a bunch of money to live off, and one doesn't. So, pluses and minuses in that respect, But yeah, but it is safer to start off on a side business, especially with the app stuff. I mean, I would highly recommend seeing if you can do that. It's difficult from a time perspective, as you know from this podcast, if you've listened to it for a while, and like it's really hard sometimes to find the time. So if you're doing a product thing, but it can be a way to dip your toes in the water, learn the stuff you need to learn, and make some side money, and then you can then transition if you want to. But
I guess the challenge is like if you're doing it the side project way, right? Where you have a full time, but you're like the toughest part is like saying, okay, like I shouldn't say the toughest, but like I know like when I started doing like sticker packs of all things, and I would get revenue from that, from like just pizza money revenue from that, just by doing just sticker packs. And I thought, if I kept doing more, I could like get more like incremental supplemental money coming in from like different sources of revenue, different sticker packs. Because the funny thing about sticker packs is like if you create, like I used to think you had to create at least 20 to 40 stickers in a pack. Turns out you only probably needed like 12 to 20 for just a reasonable, like, because that's all they like people are willing to pay for.
I keep forgetting sticker packs exist.
But if you do seasonal ones, right, or even topical ones, so you do one for Valentine's, and then you do one for horoscope one. I never saw a really good horoscope, and this is just something any artist could technically do. Of sticker packs, or if you did one about affirmations, or if you did one that was a little off, the beaten path for like from American context, like Diwali or something, some specific cultural related one. The thing is you have to keep in mind, like that type of thing happens at a different time of the year.
Oh, right. So, revenue timing.
Right. So like maybe like a lot of times like my fireworks one, I'll get a ton of downloads of that during like July 4th and Christmas, or I'm sorry, New Year's. So even though that one is free, that made me realize, like some like the model is interesting in the sense of like that can like stuff like that where you build a product or you can find opportunities there that are slow little trickles of revenue, if you will. That's what I discovered in that sense when I started doing the sticker pack stuff. And when I did the dividend calc app, I realized that one was an interesting discovery in terms of like I did in-app purchase. If you're just starting out a new project, you might consider the subscription model, which is a lot of apps do nowadays. So like Get Slopes, Joe Triplinski's caffeine app, which this escapes me. Sorry, Joe. At ClipDish, even Grocery Timer, all have subscription plans, and they're cheap. They're no more than like $10 a year or something of that nature, reasonably priced. Because of the opportunity for recurring revenue. In the case for me, I just said, you know what, I'm going to charge you you're going to see banner ads.
Yeah.
Using AdSense, like a sort of like a waterfall model of using like a combination of different ad networks. And then if you don't want to see the ads, you just pay me, I think it was maybe like close to $10 for the whole, for lifetime of purchase. And I made sure that they were annoying enough, but they weren't to be present, right? Like they're there, but they weren't annoying enough to distract from you doing what you want to do with the app.
So we got going into the logistics of you should probably create an LLC at some point. Mm-hmm. Definitely get an accountant and set up your banking and your ledger management stuff. Even if you're not making much money, trust me, very important.
Well,
Culturo knows. Mm-hmm. And understand your budget and runway, and where you actually get your revenue from. And you're kind of talking about products right now. Is if you have a bunch of like one-time purchase products mm-hmm. that are easy to make potentially. Yeah. Or low risk, we'll say they're low risk products on your end, mm-hmm. like your sticker packs that can actually provide some pizza money to get you started, and you're not investing like many months making them. Right. And then, or you can also make more of a full featured product, and then probably you want to look at subscriptions, and that also leads into on the App Store specifically. There's a small business program, which I think is only for LLCs, right? It's not for individuals. So that's another reason to get an LLC because it gives you 15% instead of 30% take, or Apple takes 15% instead of 30 on your first $1 million, I think, mm-hmm. of like subscription revenue.
Yes.
So if you're going to do a subscription model, definitely do that route because it automatically gives you 15%.
Right.
More.
Not even just that. I mean, just in general, like if you pay up front or whatever,
but
it's 15%.
Oh, okay, yeah. And so and the easiest thing, by the way, to do is probably the easiest thing to do is set a price and sell it. So I've seen this advice, and tell me if this makes sense. And when you're going to start selling a product you've never done before, just sell something for a fixed price, mm-hmm. And don't necessarily jump into a subscription first, mm-hmm. Because subscription may be the long term goal. And it definitely is better for revenue. But if you've never done it before, or if you never used StoreKit or whatever, then maybe you just like your sticker packs was a great example because if you get, someone gives you some money for sticker pack, I don't even know if you can do subscriptions or sticker packs.
No.
But that's a good way to start, and then you can get into because subscriptions are definitely more complicated. Although StoreKit 2, as we were talking about the other day on Philly Coca, is apparently a lot easier to use than the old version, and there's also a third party.
I mean, you
services.
could use something like Revenue Cat or some third party that
for
will
subscriptions.
handle...
Yeah, you probably but this is my point is like subscriptions are more complicated. There's more stuff to think about.
I mean, if I'm thinking about it from a standpoint of like what I remember my friends and colleagues would do a lot, or the various different stories about how they did it. Sometime back in the day, they might get 2 or 3 people get together and they just start a company, and they were all still working. So they worked on a project first, and then once they got the project to a reasonable state, they were like, all right, just go with it. And then, and maybe one person would take that full plunge, and while the other one was like was still working on the project, but like slowly building up, their war chest, if you will.
So this is also what I've seen in non-developer spaces. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know people have other kinds of companies, and not all of them necessarily take a salary or take like a full salary or anything. Like one person does, and the other people or owners they still have some other jobs or income, and so they're not full time on it, and like, that's super common. Super common.
In the game scene, that's actually pretty common in the sense of like they would just, man, they would struggle so hard. it was
games
amazing.
is very difficult. Which kind of, I know we're not like super strict about our topic here, but like that kind of goes into what actually to make. We've touched on a couple of different things. Games are probably the riskiest thing to get into, but they potentially have a big reward, but they're very, very risky, right? Like in terms of like if your goal is to go indie, probably the best thing to do is become a consultant if you just want to quit your day job.
Yeah.
But if you want to make products, so that's a line of thinking we've been on here. What would you give advice to somebody who is like really into making games? I mean, like I don't even know if you tell them to go onto the Apple platforms necessarily.
I guess it's tough because like when you make games, it's very much like you make music or any type of art, right? Like the if you're doing it to make money, you're probably doing it for the wrong reasons. I mean, the people who now when your game is successful or you're doing well, then of course fine. Then the money part of it can come into play. But the point being is like games are hard to make, and it requires so much passion and because you have to deal with a lot of like technical BS and challenges that a variety of different sources before you even get to the money part of it. it's literally like you think app development is hard and prototyping apps are hard, and you can kind of like like trying to make games with physics and and all sorts of edge cases that you could never imagine with like a regular app. Like you could never unit test it to death. It's just like it's just so hard to do right.
So in the kind of pattern I hear in this conversation is you start small and you work your way up to more complicated products if that's the route you're going on. And so a game would be what like a more complex product, or because just even a small game is pretty involved, right? Like there's just a lot of stuff to do. There are shortcuts. There are different aren't there different kinds of game platforms that are easier to build than others?
Sure. I mean, if you want to make a Flappy Bird, then you could be lightning in a bottle. But
if you were making games though, like what platform would you even target? That's I think my point. Like if you're making an app for an iPhone, like you're targeting iPhones, iOS, you can make a whole bunch of apps that make sense there. But with games specifically, like does it even make sense to target Apple platforms, or does it make sense to be saying if it's on Apple, it's kind of like an extra?
So I think the tough part about games is because it's such an immersive experience.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to target. Well, you could target a platform, but if you're, and maybe that might make sense it would make sense from a QA point of view, because say for example if it's a PS exclusive.
Yeah, don't go into PS1 game development. It's pretty niche now.
Although that is pretty niche, but people do.
I'm sure people do it, right? They still make like NES type compatible games.
Yeah, but it actually makes a lot of sense to target one platform first to make sure that you turn attention to like slow rollout to other platforms. So maybe you target PC first or Steam. Then maybe it's like, okay, now we're gonna have PS version that is like with all the extra niceties, and then keep going to the other consoles as you go, right? Okay. Until you slowly optimized for all of them. That's a way to do it. I mean, this is just for games. Now, if we're talking about like even in the relationship of apps, when they talk about iOS first, right? Because I guess that's where all the money people are.
People at least willing to spend some money,
right? We go back to somebody like Curtis and Slopes, like that started on iOS because partially because that's the platform he loves the most, but eventually he built a version for Android,
right?
Not quite as full featured, but that was more like a roadmap kind of thing where like, who knows, ultimately because of the way the moat that he's built around the data that it's all a good chunk of it is proprietary for his company. He can put it on whatever platform he chooses in the future.
There's a lot of interesting topics we can go into about product development. Like that's a good one you touch on there about the value add there is not just the app that's well designed, but it's also the data that enables required us to do things that competitors can't easily do and that kind of thing. But we're already getting late, so I wanted to touch on before we finish this topic here. The other approach that we haven't really talked much about is doing consulting, and there's also a lot of stuff you could talk about in consulting, but like that seems to be a very common approach. And I guess some of the questions that I think people tend to hear from people and that I had when I started is consulting is like, how do you find jobs, and how do you know how much to charge, and do you need insurance? Like, what kind of insurance? Because like those are the three questions I've heard a lot, like stuff around that.
It makes sense to get a general liability insurance. You can do one through what's it? HIS Cox. COX. I did that through that one.
Why them and not anyone else?
Because a lot of big companies would want, not because they're easy to, it's easy to set up and get done quickly. is the way. It was recommended to me. I mean, they're and that wasn't that tremendously expensive to do, but and they're very quick about getting it all set up. And if you need to cancel, they're very quick about canceling it for you. It still requires a phone call because their website's horrible, but they're actually quite easy to deal with. But that's one. In terms of the time it takes, in terms of like charging, I think you should charge to your ability, and that's very nebulous because because a lot of times what ends up happening is like getting your first gig is challenging, but once you do, you really can build up on that. So I remember when I first started, I think I charged like maybe $100 per hour, approximately. And even that's still like up and down. Like I might still charge around that depending on like how many hours I would get. That was 100
hours pretty low.
Yeah, that's very low.
I mean,
I started at 75.
Yeah,
and then I quickly jumped that up. But you probably want to charge, if you're really good, you can charge up to 2. Certainly maybe even 3.
I mean, honestly, with that kind of thing, it really depends on the project and your ability and everything. But you have to take into account that if you're doing it as a side project thing, you could charge less and still make profit. But you got to remember that when you're running a business, you got to, that revenue, it gets cut up differently with taxes and
the
expenses.
Other thing, the way you can also look at it, actually, probably the more intelligent way, is to like say, okay, what's my low bar of like annual revenue that I want to generate?
Okay.
And then you can divide that up by hours if you wanted to, right? And then like play with the rate a little bit to see like how many hours are you willing to spend times the cost. And if you can find a client that will pay that, then you're in good shape.
Yeah, and there's other methods that people have used, like there's like retainer methods. There, where that could be part. Like you could do an app. You could say you could pay me like this retainer type fee to do certain kinds of updates to this app over time, like so you can get some recurring revenue. There's and of course there's just the bespoke app development, which is probably the thing you charge the most for because it's the most risky. There's like updating existing apps that you could charge different amounts for these things.
I think some people charge weekly or monthly or daily.
Yeah. Like
that was a one trick that I know. Technique that would be a good way.
If we get Zorn on here, we can talk to him because he's had a lot of consulting ideas.
I mean, there are a lot of things that
experiences.
When I do it, I kind of prefer hourly because I know people will sneak things in if I try to do flat rate. And that's sort of almost a deterrent. Now, the counter argument to that is like, oh, they're going to say, "What am I paying you for if you're doing half of that with?"
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like the how much to charge thing is its own deep discussion because it there, of course, like with everything, it depends.
Sure.
And the one other thing, because we have to wrap these things up, is how do you even find your client, especially your first one?
So co-working spaces was the way I found them. Almost the first time I joined Indie Hall, I got 2 gigs right off the bat. That's one. So in other words, networking. You need to go out. You need to talk to people. You need to, and not just places that you normally would find these opportunities. I mean, not just places like a co-working space, but places that you can find these opportunities. So meetups that are you keep it. You might even go as many as you can, not only just to get a vibe, but get a sense of maybe some people who might be looking to recruit a consultant.
Exactly. Yeah. Now that meetups are increasingly more in person again, that might be a good thing to do.
Also, do talks. At these meetups. To go to conferences. And yes, that costs money, but you got to get yourself out there.
Yes, getting yourself out there. We know that our friend of the show, Mohammed Fani, has a blog that's very interesting and useful, especially because he's always posting things that are from his level, and which means that, I guess, time goes on. Like, people coming in who are slightly earlier in their development life can learn from his blog, and that gives him a reputation. Like, that's really going to be really good to building up his reputation over time. Going to conferences, giving talks. If you do that kind of stuff. And I think you should, and we could have a whole thing about the talks too. Don't be afraid of doing a talk, and start out at a local meetup, like come to Philly Coke or something. We're always looking for talks.
We're not trying to get people to do talks for us at all.
Yeah, we talk. No, I mean, but you can always do it because it's a friendly and it's a friendly environment. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can do a podcast. There's lots of things. Just get yourself out there, networking in your especially within the community that you're trying to do work for. Like, if you're an app developer for iPhones, you probably want to make sure people know that about you. but your customers are not necessarily the people in, like, the other developers in that community.
Yeah.
So it's like you have to think about what your market is too, and that's a whole other discussion, which we don't have time for today because we are already over time.
So,
but any last thoughts, Kotaro, about going indie that you want to make sure we touch on?
I think if you have the passion for it, you should go for it.
I agree.
I don't know if I don't want to. Again, it all depends on your situation, but
I would recommend thinking carefully about the money situation so you don't put yourself in a bad spot. But there's no reason why you can't go indie nowadays in various ways. There's just so many potential opportunities. It's not easy, though. That's what I would say. I would say set your expectations correct. It is very, very hard most of the time. Like, you can always find people who did it, like, they just decided and then they were like a millionaire. But like, it's probably going to be hard. But if you're passionate, it can be a lot of fun too.
Yes, at the very least, it's a very good learning experience that you will take with you.
Yeah.
But that's all we have for today.
Yep.
You can learn more at PhillyCoco at phillycoco.org. There you'll find links to our Slack group, meetup schedule, and contact info. If you're feeling generous, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever your podcast platform of choice is. And please share us with all your developer friends. And one more thing. Why did the programmer go broke?
Because he was a bad consultant?
Because he used up all his cash.
Oh my God. He used up all his cash.
All right, here's another one.
That's good.
Why was the JavaScript developer sad?
Well, I have a snarky answer. Let's see what yours is.
Because he didn't know how to null his feelings.
Oh, man.
And here's the last one. Why did the Swift developer get lost in the forest?
Why?
Because they couldn't find their way back from a map closure.
Oh, man. Closure jokes. That's how you know we're programmers.
And by the way, these are all generated by ChatGPT.
Oh, nice.
Till next time, good luck on your own developer journey. We will cheer for you always.
We're just trying to give people an example of what not to do.